From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I'm Camila Escalante. Activists gathered today near the Venezuelan embassy in Washington to continue to call for the U.S. government to end sanctions and intervention in Venezuela. A march began at the embassy and headed to the White House yesterday. Demonstrators have condemned the violation of the Vienna Convention in the Trump administration's seizure of the embassy and the legal process which the 4 members of the Embassy Protection Collective face after being arrested and charged earlier this week. For an insider perspective on what took place this week at the Venezuelan embassy in Washington, I'm joined by Amita. Amita is an activist with Answer Coalition and was part of the Embassy Protection Collective. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Let's begin with the decision that you and other activists made to actually leave the embassy and the risk of arrest, which became a reality for the 4 members of the collective. And if you can provide us a bit of an update with the charges that they face.
Yeah, certainly. So I think that what we saw develop a lot while the Embassy Protection Collective was still inside is that, the police and the Secret Service, MPD, they definitely have been working alongside with the opposition. They've been working alongside with the State Department in order to ensure that democracy, that Venezuelan sovereignty is ultimately dismissed. Ever since the 4 embassy protectors were they were in jail for approximately 2 days. They have now, they could potentially face charges of up to a year in prison and also a $1,000 fine. To my understanding as well, they do have to notify when they are going to be traveling outside of the country. So travel restrictions are also a part of the charges that are being held against them. However, I think it's really important to note that as the United States raided the Venezuelan embassy, that too is a huge violation of international law. And so we have to see how this court case progresses in the time that comes in order to see, what are the implications that occur not only for the embassy protectors, but for the state of international law as a whole.
Absolutely. And after leaving the embassy, can you describe what happened when you tried to deliver food to those still inside?
Definitely. So anytime that we attempted to deliver food, not only there would be opposition outside. They would make it impossible for anybody to actually enter the Venezuelan embassy. And furthermore, the Secret Service, MPD, federal agents, they all helped the opposition. They all got very close to the opposition. And so we had to sneak food in. We tried a couple times to establish a pulley system, but that wasn't necessarily always successful. I know on just my own personal experience, I remember trying to jump down to the lower part of the building. And as I was trying to put a backpack of food inside a pulley, one of the opposition members, the pro-U.S. coup, pro-Juan Guaido supporter, Matthew Berwick, who has been outside of the Venezuelan embassy, for a little bit after the Embassy Protection Collective was established, he physically assaulted me and he attempted to pry the backpack outside of my hand. I mean, these people are so rude and disrespectful, and more importantly, they're violent. I'm seeing here that you have on the screen when Reverend Jesse Jackson and Ajamu Baraka attempted to get food in, and thankfully that was a huge success. That was the last time that food was delivered into the embassy until previously. But even then, you can see in part of the video, Ajamu Baraka was had his hands on Matthew Berwick because he was violently trying to take the backpack out of peaceful activists' hands. So there's definitely been a lot of conflict surrounding that.
Journalist Alex Rubinstein actually captured a video of you carrying a Sandinista flag in front of Venezuelan opposition supporters. What prompted you to do that, and how do the struggles of the Nicaraguan and Venezuelan people relate?
Well, I mean, for me, having the opportunity to learn about the Sandinista movement in Nicaragua, I am moved by the ways in which they attempted to make a significant change for the people of Nicaragua, especially through, specifically Marxist tactics, which I think, are key. And a lot of what I see in terms of whether it's Nicaragua or in Venezuela is that you have folks who are trying to establish anything for their self-determination. People are tired of capitalist tactics derived from colonialism, derived from racism, sexism, and I think that from whether it's from DC to Managua to Caracas, our struggles are really, much similar than we're taught that they are. And there's a lot of unity to be presented there. So, for me, it's been really quite wonderful to be able to express not only my solidarity with the people of Venezuela, but alongside with the people of Nicaragua as well.
So the collective is no longer in the embassy building, but U.S. interventionist policies are intensifying every day. Where does the fight go from here?
I mean, like I said prior, I think that, this court case will shed a lot of light on how the United States government really, truly attempts to have huge disregard for any sort of international law. But I think that with the resilience that the Embassy Protection Collective has established, our battle, our struggle does not end here. We will continue to be outside of the embassy. We will continue to call out people like Juan Guaido and Carlos Vecchio alongside with people like John Bolton, Mike Pompeo, because these are people who are complicit in trying to completely diminish, to remove the legitimate president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro. And so, I'm very optimistic. I think that we're going to continue to see a lot of victories in spite, of people not being in the embassy anymore. We still stayed there for a total of, I believe, 37 days. So, there are a lot of really brilliant revolutionary people who are both on the inside and on the outside, and I am extremely eager to see how this will further develop.
Thanks so much for bringing us the latest, Amita. We've been speaking to Amita, who is an activist with Answer Coalition, and she was also a part of the Embassy Protection Collective. And our correspondent in Washington, Alina Duarte, who continues to follow the action, spoke with prominent civil rights activist Reverend Jesse Jackson.
Hold on for your democracy. Fight for democracy. There are rebel forces in Venezuela. Both of them are Venezuelans. We care for both sides of the war. Both of them are our people. Both are Venezuelan. We must, in fact, choose reconciliation over confrontation. We need the UN involved and go to the bargaining table, wave the belt. There'll be no winners where one group kills off the other group. We must have a commitment to healing and reconciliation, not confrontation. We care for all Venezuelans on both sides of the struggle. We must end the war and choose peace.
And what's your opinion about Trump's policy on war around the world?
Well, Trump, unashamed to choose oil over human rights. His trade war with China is going to hurt a lot of people. It's going to hurt a lot of Chinese. It's going to hurt a lot of Americans. Our war with Iraq is not over, and Syria is not over. We overthrew Libya. It was not fair. Now we're looking at North Korea and Iran. We're fighting ourselves into isolation. The more we fight, the more isolated we become. The more we fight, the more isolated we become. I'm convinced a new peace movement will be born based on the Venezuelan struggle. A new peace movement will be born in this country. Venezuela is in our hemisphere. Venezuela is in our hemisphere. These are our neighbors. Venezuela is not foreigners. They're down the Pan-American Highway. These are our neighbors. We must end the war. We're stopping food in Venezuela. We're stopping food. We're stopping water. We cannot. America is starving the people of Venezuela, not Maduro. Trump is cutting off food and cutting off water, cutting off supplies. We're trying to starve Venezuela's mission. We must not do that. And Venezuela must not give up. They must not surrender their spirits that fight for self-determination.
This Saturday, during an activity for the Socialist United Party of Venezuela, President Nicolas Maduro provided a phone interview in which he spoke about the positive developments in a process which is taking place in Oslo, Norway, between the Bolivarian government and the Venezuelan opposition.
I received a report from Minister Jorge Rodriguez, chief of the Venezuelan delegation in the process of dialogue that has been promoted by the Norwegian government and which began this week in Oslo, capital city. I received a report from Hector Rodriguez. They both have been members of the first delegation, and we received good news. Good news. You know, I've called for national dialogue more than 600 times for peace in this country. I believe that in Venezuela there's room for all. And many times we've been able to sit down with the opposition in a dialogue, work, negotiation table, to arrive to agreements. I express all my support and call for all the country's support.
Now to Colombia, where an emergency meeting was called by the leadership of the Revolutionary Alternative Force for the Commons, or the FARC, in Bogota. The meeting comes after Jesus Santrich was arrested once again after being only momentarily released on Friday following 13 months of detention. Two representatives from the UN verification mission attended to explain part of the political situation and to demonstrate actions signaling bad faith in the implementation of the peace agreement signed in Havana in 2016. The president of the FARC, Rodrigo Londoño, called on citizens to remain calm and urged members and supporters to not give in to the attempts to deplete the peace process. The FARC party also held a media conference during which the leadership announced what they've deemed to be the systematic murder of former combatants, as well as what it says is the persecution of sectors which are working to guard the process or the progress of the peace process.
Aside from this case, we want to denounce the 139 murders of former FARC members who have signed the peace agreement, horrible and perverse cases such as the baby of Samuel González in the Guajira region, and the murder of Dilmar Torres in the Caratumbo region. There is no doubt that there is a sector which is trying to turn the peace agreements onto a dead-end road, which could bring violent consequences for our nation.
The FARC party also directed a call to President Iván Duque to respond to the request for a meeting with the party.
Mr. President Duque, since the beginning of your administration, we requested a meeting to discuss the terms of the final resolution for the peace agreements. However, until this day, we haven't received any answer from you. How many people must die for you to finally decide to meet with us and hear us?
On Saturday, the New York Times published an article which detailed how the head of the Colombian army ordered his troops to double down on killings, even at the risk of higher civilian casualties. Colombian Senator Iván Cepeda spoke to Telesur and said that under the current government, there is a continuation of the deadly security policies which had been implemented by former President Álvaro Uribe.
What we have is an attempt to resurface all criminal practices against human rights. The main object here is to design policies and legal instruments to allow members of military forces to murder people in order to fulfill a series of requirements and reach a specific number of murders and prepare a report for their higher officials. We need to completely eradicate these criminal acts from the history of the military forces of Colombia. If it is a part of the doctrine that any measure is vital to obtain results, it is obvious that they are going to present formal results by murdering social leaders and civilians. These policies are not only within the framework of armed operations against criminal organizations, but also promotes other forms of violence, such as the murdering of social leaders.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again in a minute. Welcome back. 180 Venezuelans are still in Lima after Peru's national energy company, Repsol, refused to supply fuel to two planes belonging to Venezuela's Conviasa state airline. The flight scheduled for the return migrants to Venezuela on Saturday were part of the Return to the Homeland plan. Venezuelan Minister Jorge Arriaza accused Repsol of joining the criminal economic blockade waged by the Trump administration and urged the government of Peru to stick to its humanitarian discourse and resolve the situation. Repsol has since responded, saying that the flights have been now rescheduled for Monday.
We are a group of Venezuelans. The majority of us are homeless, without work. Many of us don't have money to maintain ourselves for 2 to 3 days to receive the gas which you've said has already been paid for. Please, this is inhumane. Where is the humanity? We'll be sleeping on the street. I can speak for myself and say I won't be leaving the door of the embassy until this situation is resolved. Our group consists of mothers, pregnant women, the elderly, people with illnesses, with disabilities. They need to resolve this issue as soon as possible, and it needs to be resolved today. This is an emergency. This is not a game. We're in another country, fine. They opened their doors to us, and we are grateful. But today we need to return to our home, to return to our country.
Our correspondent in Lima, Jaime Herrera, was on the ground on Saturday and filed this report.
It's been a long day. During the morning period, some 180 Venezuelans found themselves stranded outside the embassy after they were told that they could not board 2 flights that were supposed to take them back to their homeland. You see, Peru's national energy company, Repsol, failed to make good on its contractual obligation to supply fuel to the 2 Conviasa Airlines aircraft, even though their company had been paid to do so 2 weeks ago. This left the 180 Venezuelan nationals essentially stranded in Lima. Pressure from the Foreign Ministry and the Consulate of Venezuela in Peru, as well as Telesur's reporting on the development, has seemingly made Repsol reconsider its position. And as the Venezuelan Foreign Minister, Jorge Arriaza, has said, Repsol has since apologized and also committed to flying the Venezuelans back home on Monday. Let's remember that over 100 Venezuelans, many of whom are complete families, were left in the street, some with serious health problems, who were unable to receive medical attention, such as one person who has serious kidney problems and is in urgent need of dialysis, and it's way too costly. Over 50 children and even a number of pregnant women are among those who remain in Peru, hopeful of returning to their homeland on Monday.
During his speech at the Movement Towards Socialism campaign event on Saturday, Bolivia's President Evo Morales highlighted the important economic advances achieved in the country during his tenure, which began in 2006.
Here are some important stats that make us feel proud of our government achievements. In 180 years of history, the ruling class took away our GDP and left us $9 billion. Last year, our GDP reached $40.8 billion. That's the economic strength of Bolivia. We project a GDP growth by the year 2025 of more than $50 billion. This will benefit the Bolivian people. Brothers and sisters, I also want to tell the younger generations how much the GDP per capita was in 2005. It was only $900. Last year, we increased the GDP per capita to more than $4,000. Economic development and great progress in our beloved Bolivia.
Now to Argentina, where after recently announcing his run for Argentina's presidency, Alberto Fernandez says he believes that the time has come for serious political, social, and economic reform in the country.
Argentina must re-evaluate, we all must, how we all work, not only the political leadership, not only business management, not only the trade unions, but now we all have to work as citizens. Christina speaks about the need to rebuild a citizen pact, a citizen contract. To be a citizen is more than to be part of a people, for it's the people with the rights and obligations. I share Christian's position that we have to make new rules that we can respect, because Argentina's greatest problems is that we are not respecting the rules.
The Sao Paulo Forum has expressed support for Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro and his Nicaraguan counterpart, Daniel Ortega. Nicaragua is hosting the extraordinary session of the forum, which is made up of 15 countries from Latin America and the Caribbean. Some member states have proclaimed that the defense of peace will be a priority for countries that oppose U.S. interventionist policies. Venezuela will host the 25th session of the Sao Paulo Forum in July. 4 people were killed and 21 were injured in the Cuban capital after a vehicle swerved off Havana's Malecon and hit several pedestrians. One of the individuals who lost their lives was Ulysses Canales, a journalist and former Telesur colleague. We send our condolences to his family. The cause of the crash is being investigated by authorities. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back. Saudi Arabia's energy minister has recommended driving oil inventories down, saying that global oil supplies were plentiful. He was addressing a ministerial panel meeting of top OPEC and non-OPEC oil producers, chaired by Venezuela's oil minister, Manuel Quevedo. The meeting comes amid forecasts of a tight market ahead as OPEC has seen its production fall significantly this year. Palestinian, Israeli, and international artists have come together to put on a series of concerts as an alternative to the Eurovision Song Contest held in Tel Aviv. This amid protests calling for a boycott of the Eurovision competition. Outside the alternative concert venue, pro-Palestinian supporters called for worldwide protests against Israeli policies in the West Bank and Gaza. Global Vision was held in Bethlehem in the occupied West Bank, Haifa, London, and Dublin on Saturday. At one of these concerts, performers took to a small stage close to Israel's West Bank barrier that separates the Palestinian territories from Jerusalem and Israel.
I think it's artist washing of a state that is disrespecting and being atrocious towards Palestinian people and taking away their human rights. I think that we're seeing it again and again, even soccer events, international, now with Eurovision, these states that disrespect human rights and are using international platforms to try and artist wash or whitewash or just clear their name, and it's false. We have to remind people that it's false.
Today, the world commemorates the birthday of Malcolm X, the iconic U.S. human rights activist whose legacy continues to inspire generations. Born Malcolm Little, he became an influential leader of the African-American struggle for freedom, equality, and self-determination. Brother Malcolm, as he was affectionately called, indicted white America in the harshest terms for its crimes against Black Americans. He left a broad legacy that revolved around the ideas of Black nationalism, self-defense, building Black institutions, fighting against colonialism in Africa and America, international solidarity, and understanding the parasitic and exploitative nature of capitalism. Once an outspoken public voice of the Black Muslim faith, Malcolm X also challenged mainstream civil rights movements. He was assassinated in 1965.
For education, you can only work on a poor-paying job, and that poor-paying job enables you to live again in a poor neighborhood. So it's a very vicious cycle, and usually these bad housing conditions result from the fact, as Mr. Gray has pointed out, of absentee landlords, people who are rich and live downtown and let you and I live up here in the shack. Actually, it's a form of 20th century slavery. And what you and I have to let the man know is we are peaceful people. We are loving people. We love everybody who loves us. But we don't love anybody who doesn't love us.
Who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin to such extent that you bleach to get like the white man? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and the shape of your lips? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? Who taught you to hate your own kind? Who taught you to hate the race that you belong to? So much so that you don't want to be around each other. No, before you come asking Mr. Muhammad, does he teach hate? You should ask yourself, who taught you to hate being what God gave you?
We've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at tellusorenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Tell Us Our English, I'm Camila Escalante. Thanks for watching.